Hello, 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 everybody. I am Rosalind Brown of Your Wealth Guidance, where we help Black women create their financial independence map and identify the tools for success so you can live your life on your own terms. I want to thank you all for being here with us again today. Please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a Money Monday. Now, today we have a very special guest. And I mean, if you have worked in corporate America for a day, for 2 days, 10 weeks, 5 minutes, I'm quite sure you have encountered an office conflict or two. So we have Cierra Gross with us. She is a human resources professional and DEI advocate. She's going to talk to us about how to engage with HR to overcome office conflict and create better outcomes. And she's going to share insider information that she's learned throughout her professional career to help you go into HR with confidence and armed with knowledge. Cierra received her master's in human resources from the University of South Carolina. After graduation, she received a full-time job with ExxonMobil and over to Google, where she spent almost 2 years in some various roles there. And she worked at Ducci, a Canna tech startup, before starting CageBird HR. She currently works full time for CageBird and lives in New York City. I am so happy for this conversation today because, like I said, when you first start working, you walk in, you are like rosy and ready to go. And you're like, things are going to be great. I'm going to work so hard. And then all of a sudden something happens and you're like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they be the team player that the company mission says we are? And so tell us a little bit about, one, what you do, but two, how are you helping people out there kind of maneuver HR?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Cierra Gross. Like she said, I'm the founder, principal consultant of CageBird HR, which is a full service integrated consulting firm, probably the first of its kind, where we have two verticals. One, I consult with individual employees about various topics, discrimination, harassment, interpersonal conflicts, severance, quitting, career changes, anything that you can think of. I consult directly with employees, and then I also work with companies in a more traditional sense as far as HR consulting, where we provide full service HR support for companies that value DEI, that care about DEI, and want to create inclusive cultures through their HR processes and practices. So the value that we add is we have real-time data from marginalized employees who are coming to CageBird to get advice. In that process, they're honest with us in ways that they would never be with their employer. And so we have, real live insights into the lived experiences of marginalized employees in corporate America. And then we turn around and use that data and analytics to recommend relevant and impactful strategies and solutions to companies that actually care. So a lot of our clients are small businesses or startups. And then, I consult with people who work at all kinds of companies: Google, Savage, Fenty, Cisco, really just any company that hires people. I consult with them. I started this business, like she said. I have a master's degree in human resources. I've worked at a lot of different companies. I've been fortunate enough to never really have to look for a job. I've always been recruited for work, and then until I started this company. But the reason I started this business is because I too have had some unfortunate experiences at work, and I think my education and experience in HR and just understanding how HR works, the rules and the laws in which companies have to abide by, really helped me to create, better outcomes for myself personally, just because I understood the system in which I was operating in, because most of my career I was on the other side of the table. So I've had some unfortunate experiences, but, I was able to create outcomes for myself by way of, really large severance agreements to create better outcomes. And then at 3:00 in the morning one day, I was like, man, somebody could probably use an independent person to talk to. And so I I started Cage Bird HR January 17th, and it's been nonstop ever since. So that's why I started this business. I feel like this is a labor of love for me. I feel like I'm aligned in my passion and purpose, which is ultimately to help Black people, particularly Black women, who are most of my clients are 99% Black women, navigate these situations at work. I was telling Rosalind that your manager and HR have the most power over your career, but people really don't understand how HR works. And so part of my work is educating people on the HR function and what we do, and how we deal with employee matters and situations. I also provide people with insight into what's going to happen before it happens, because I used to be in HR for these really large companies. So we do provide that insight in hopes to reduce stress as far as like when they actually do go to HR. So that's what I do. And I'm happy to be here. I feel like this time is really you guys' time to ask me any kind of questions that you may have. I'd be happy to answer if I don't know, or if you have a really specific situation. I would just tell you, to make the best use of this time, we should book time to get as many questions answered as possible. But really excited to be here and ready to answer some questions.
Well, I think the first question, and I mean, like you said, most of us have kind of dealt with something. And some people there's so many different ways that people kind of deal with this stress. And sometimes it's coming from your direct manager. So when you talk about like manager HR, sometimes it's like, this is supposed to be my teammate.
Right.
And so there's that. And then there is sometimes just the simple fact of like, what route do you go? And so one of the questions is, how or when do you go to HR? So, you've said, hey, this isn't fair. So and so did this to me. Or I've worked very hard and someone took credit, whatever the situation might be. When do you say, all right, try step one, now it's step two?
Right. So, at Cage Bird, we really make it a point not to tell people when they can and can't go to HR, because I have no right to determine, to make judgments on your lived experience. Right. So like if you feel something is bothering you and you feel like you want to go to HR, I would encourage you to do so. Now, with that being said, I understand as African Americans that comes with a lot of risk, right? Like it's not as simple as just going to HR, raising a concern and getting your needs met, right? We're always battling racism, tropes, stereotypes, career progression, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my advice is, unless it's something overt, like overt racism or, physical assault or something like that, I personally go through a 3-step process, just because of how the law works, right? So the first time somebody says something left out of field to me, I always just write it down. So every time I start a new job, literally on day one, I create my own file, some sort of Word document where I just call it like my notes or receipts or whatever. And I use this document as a way to write things down that I want to, keep track of or make note of, right? So let's say somebody like says something to me where I'm not sure, like a microaggression. It's not overt racism, but like, because I've been Black for 30 years, I know that this probably was a layered, sentence or something, right? The first time I'll just write it down, make a note of who, what, when, where, and why, and how it made me feel. And the reason for that is I try to extend grace where possible. So sometimes, the elusivity of racism is what perpetuates it, right? So like, it's never really, unless it's overt, it's like, was it racist? Was it not? Just write it down. So every time I start a new job, literally on day one, I create my own. So like, I can hear myself. It's a playback. Can you hear that?
Let me see. Okay. You're good.
I think it's okay. Where was I at? Oh, so I just write it down because sometimes it's not overt, and I don't want to accuse somebody of being racist at work. That's not going to end well for me. So I just write it down and I don't say anything to anybody about it. The second time, if the same person says something to me, then I'm going to have a conversation with the person. And the conversation is going to go something like this. Hey, I wanted to, talk to you because I want to make sure we have a productive working relationship. You said this to me. I didn't really know what you meant by it. So I wanted to just have a conversation just to, explore that more. And also, the other day, you said this to me, and I'm going to go in detail because I wrote it down about what was said, who was there when he said it. And so now this is like twice. And so, I just want to make sure that you and I are on the same page and aligned, and that I'm not like, making assumptions about, what you did and didn't mean, etc. So now I have it written down, and I'm now having a conversation with the person about this behavior. The third time, if that person says something to me, I'm going to go straight to HR, and I'm going to go with receipts. I'm going to say, hey, look, this person said this to me on this day. And then, a week later, they said this to me, and I had a conversation with them, and I asked them to stop. And now they're saying it again. The reason why I like this 3-step process is because under the law, if you have a right to a workplace that's free of harassment, but harassment is defined as repetition, right? It can't be a one-off thing. It has to be something that's done over and over and over again. And then generally the person has to be aware that, this behavior is considered problematic and has to stop. So by going through the 3-step process, you're kind of taking off all the boxes under law as to what constitutes a harassment or a hostile work environment. And it gives me the opportunity to be the victim, right? Because sometimes we just accuse people of racism and they try to walk it back, right? Because all they got to do is say, oh, no, I didn't mean anything by it, oops, But when there's repeated behavior, it's like, okay, it's not just a one-off thing. You've now said it twice or something of the same note. And so now I'm going to go to HR. And when you do that, if the HR people are worth their salt, they're going to take action more so than if you were just come in and be like, oh, it's racism. Because at that point, it's going to say, oh, we talked to them and they said it wasn't. Or something to that effect, right? But if you have a pattern of behavior that you can display and back up with receipts, it's just going to force them to take it a little bit more seriously. Also, so that's the when. The how is always in writing, 100% of the time. 100% of the time. Don't ever wait to get on the phone call with HR. And the reason why is because HR never writes anything down. Not that they send to you anyways, right? So when you go to HR, they have like their own little system. We have our own little systems or whatever that we input data in. But like if you ever complained to HR and then they did an investigation and then they came back to you with the outcome, they never email that to you. It's always, hey, let's hop on a call, or hey, let's jump in a meeting room. And they had that conversation face to face. The reason for that is because if you were to sue, all of that documentation is discoverable. So they want as little documentation as possible, which is why you always want to go in writing, because you want your side of the story on record. In absence of that, the only side of the story is what they have in the system. And we know that that may or may not be an accurate reflection of your lived experience.
I think that's a really big one, because it's like, once you say, hey, can I have a conversation, or I'm concerned about something? And then you mentioned just skipping management. And I think some people are like, oh, no, let me take it to the manager first. Is that usually the best, to just skip management, go straight to HR and have that documentation there? Or should you like CC them on the email, that kind of thing?
It's hard for me to say because I'm not in the environment, right? Like I don't know people's relationships with their managers. I don't know if they like their managers like them. I don't know how, there's so many variables that go along with management that I'm not really sure. I think people have to use their best judgment. If you have a good relationship with your manager and you don't want to blindside them, sure, you can have a conversation with them over the phone first and be like, hey, I just want to bring this to your attention that this is happening. But ultimately, if you were ever to seek accountability from a company, you need to engage with HR, because when you start a job, you sign an employee handbook. And in that employee handbook, it says, if you've experienced any of these things, you need to do this, right? So whatever that is, you need to do that. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is down the line, if you ever try to get accountability in other ways, they're just going to say, oh, well, we didn't know. She signed the handbook at the beginning saying that she understood the process. She chose not to engage in it. So how would we possibly know that this was an issue?
Of course. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
someone has a very specific question. I'm guessing this is a situation that happened at work, and you might have to put a little more details in here so we kind of understand the situation. So she says, how do you handle someone taking an item from lost and found and then wearing it and potentially, I don't know if they're losing it. And so maybe, I don't know if it's your item they took from lost and found, but I guess they're just kind of looking at opportunity. So, I mean, this could be a number of different environments where they're just saying, oh, this looks nice. And they're taking that information. So I don't know, are you asking, should they report that, or is it your stuff? Kind of give us a little more color around there. But I guess if you could give us some guidance based on that question.
I would agree with you that I would just need a little bit more context. Is it like somebody took your things out of lost and found, or are now wearing it around the office? Because I think that would be something that you would go to HR about, like, hey, somebody took my thing out of lost and found. But I would just need more color into the situation to be able to really make a comment.
Drop that in the chat. Give us a little bit more. That sounds like a juicy story we might want to hear anyway. It's always some crazy stories that happen. You're like, maybe
I've heard a lot of stories. I've never heard anybody taking it lost and found. So
like, what they do?
Was it
No.
I was just reading the comment. She said
it was a scarf. Okay.
It was your scarf and somebody stole it, or. But while she's doing that,
we'll jump to another question and come back. Let us know if it was your scarf, if it's somebody else's scarf, kind of what that looks like. Now, one thing, I mean, I've experienced it, and you talk about overt discrimination and racism. You know, there's always those things where it's like somebody touch your hair, somebody makes a weird comment, like those kind of things. How do you document discrimination in a way that you can then take that and they can't just simply say, she's too sensitive? We didn't mean anything about that, when they say, you know, and they, you know, we're in political environments and they're making comments about who's not really Black, or who's not Black enough. And you're like, I'm sitting here, I hear y'all. How do you document those things adequately so you can actually get some results and tell them to shut up, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I think, you know, one of the things that I tell my clients is that we cannot be concerned about what others think about the validity of your lived experience, right? It is your lived experience. And, you know, HR is a white female dominated industry. And so that's part of the problem, right? That there are people, especially with Black women and white women, because the tension in that relationship goes way back to slavery and civil rights and voting, you know, and all of that stuff. So that has manifested its way into the workplace. However, if you're going to go to HR and you feel like you're being discriminated against, you should say that. You should use the word discrimination. Or if you feel like you're being harassed, you say, I feel harassed. Because these are HR buzzwords, right? Now, it doesn't mean that just because you say it's true. However, if an HR person reads that and they're worth their salt, they're going to take that seriously, because under the law, you're doubly protected as a Black woman, right? Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which you can't be discriminated against for a lot of different reasons. One is race, two is sex, sexual orientation, disability status, veteran status, etc. And so when people who are protected under Title VII raise complaints to HR, they're usually taken seriously than those who, more seriously than those who are not, because the risk to the company is higher. And so that's why when we hear people say HR is there to protect the company, HR is really there to protect the company from getting sued, right? They don't care about you raising complaints. We're not here to protect you from getting a new job or from posting on LinkedIn or from, making complaints about your manager. HR is really there to limit a company's risk of getting sued. And when you are protected under Title VII, that risk increases. And so every time one of my clients comes to me and they say, hey, like, how do I bring this up? I say, well, you should use one of these buzzwords: discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment, because it just signals to the HR person that, okay, this is somebody who's doubly protected under the law, and they're basically saying that their rights are being violated. So I don't think you should, I know it's a hard socialization to undo, like, oh, how are people gonna da, 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 da. But I can guarantee you, I've never met a white person who thinks that thought before they go to HR. They just go because they have this lived experience. And I'm not using white people as a moral standard. I'm simply saying that I'm just simply saying that we have to undo the socialization of overthinking what people are going to think, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Like, this is your lived experiences, and you have rights under the law and in the workplace just like everybody else.
And I think we talked about this even before we started tonight, is that kind of internalization of, we don't complain, we work hard, keep your head down, and definitely not wanting. And I just finished reading 1619 Project. I'm gonna do a review on that later. But it talked about kind of this space where it was like, get over racism, it doesn't exist, don't use the race card, that kind of thing. And so I know personally, it's like, am I being overly sensitive? Am I taking this too far? And so you start to question yourself, even if you logically know, come on now, like, these folks ain't crazy. They not stupid. Like, they 100% know what they're saying, what they're doing, how they're treating you, how they are coming together as a collective to do certain things that derail your career, or just your confidence in your day to day, or confidence, your client's confidence in you, or whatever it might be. So using those words, I know it might be hard to, like, do I want to say that happened to me? No, like, yeah, like, it happened. It happens.
Yeah, I think this is socialization, right? Because the deniability of racism is what perpetuates it. And so just going to HR and saying, like, hey, I feel like I'm discriminated. You don't have to be at work. You could be in a store and somebody following you around the store, and you're like, damn, are they following me around the store because I'm Black? Or are they following me around the store because they just security and are doing their job? And you know what I'm saying? So that's the part about racism that it makes you question yourself, like, am I tripping? But I tell my clients, we cannot, if you never go to HR, you never get your needs met. That's just a fact. That's just a fact of reality in corporate America, because HR is a function that is designed to protect your employee rights. Now, whether they're doing that or not is a completely different story. But that is where you need to go to get accountability first and foremost. And I help clients write complaints to HR all day. It's like it's like half of my day, because they send me, these pages of documents of things that have happened to them, and I kind of condense it into the most damning things, and then write it in such a way where a qualified HR person would read it and take some sort of action.
So if you got something, if you got your file, put that together. Now, we got a little bit more color around the scarf. So she said it is someone else's scarf, and it was, I guess it was a cold day. So this person just went in the lost and found and said, hey, I want to be warm. And so it's someone else's scarf that has some type of sentimental value. So I'm guessing you're saying, how should you report it? Should you, go straight to them? Do you pull it off their neck?
You should definitely go to HR, or I would say HR, but if you're your manager or tight, you can go to them too. But that's technically stealing. So I would just go to HR and be like, hey, I lost a scarf. Apparently somebody turned it into lost and found, and now I'm seeing this person walking around with it on. Like, can you help me get my scarf back? Is what I would do.
Now, this is one, and I think this is a big one, because I know people are like, I ain't going to HR because HR gonna get you fired. And so someone says, in all my years of corporate America, I've never seen involving HR work out for the person doing the reporting. And so I know that's one of those fears where it's like, do you need to be looking for another job while you're reporting to HR? How do you protect your job? And is it more so making sure you have the right documentation, or being prepared for, all right, it's either you're going to treat me better, lawsuit, new job, those kind of things? Like, how do we get over that kind of fear, which I'm sure that's probably the number one reason why people aren't going to HR?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of layers to why people don't go to HR. Part of it is because of the image and the, name, reputation HR has developed for itself as, being there to protect the company. HR didn't always used to be that way. Like back in the day, we were more like the compliance police. Hey, welcome to this job. Fill out your I-9. Here's the bathroom. We're going to throw you a party. Over time, though, HR has decided to become more of a strategic partner to the business and really decide that they want the business to be their main client as opposed to employees. And so that's how we've come to this phase in society where nobody really wants to go to HR because they're going to get fired. I have seen people go to HR and it work out for them. I'm one of them. I became very rich, if I'm just being honest, going to HR and getting severance agreements. But that's also because I know the rules, right? And that's why I share it with others. I also think it's important to understand that HR cannot fire you for an illegal reason. I mean, they can, but it's very unlikely that they'll just fire you, right? One, because your employment is at will. So when you start a job, say, oh, your employment is at will. You can quit anytime. We can fire you at any time. But HR never recommends you fire somebody just because their employment is at will. And the reason for that is because in the absence of a legally justified reason, people just be like, oh, it was because I'm Black. It was because of how I identify. And that's a risk for the company. And so instead, what they do is they conjure up reasons we talked about earlier. If you log off for 2 minutes too long, they fired you. And there's lots of examples of this in the media. Tended Jabru is one of them. The guy at Amazon who was organizing a union, he led a walkout and they fired him for like violation of COVID policies, right? So they exploit the rules, which is why I tell everybody you need to read your handbook, for one. Or two, they'll go the performance route, which is probably the easier of the two from a legally defensible perspective. And they'll say, oh, well, your performance is not good. And so we're gonna put you on a PIP and, 60, 90 days later, you ain't got a job. So it is a risk. I tell my clients, the risk is not zero. I had somebody call me and we were working through it, and in a literal next day they fired her. The good thing about that was I had told her to write down that she had felt that she was going to be retaliated against, and the next day she was. So she ended up getting a lawyer, and everything worked out. But the risk is not zero. This is what I would say, and it really depends on your documentation and how much receipts you can prove or that you have to make a case against the employer. But HR rarely just fires people for no reason. They either generate reasons or they'll exploit, little rules in the rule book to try to like cover up the fact that they're actually retaliating against you.
Now, you made a point, and we talked about this before we started the session tonight, and you talked about it is your file. And I think this is probably the part that we miss, because day one, you like, new job, better place, things are rosy, this is great. And you don't start making a notation of even the good. And so I'm quite sure if you've been on your job for a few months, you had a performance review and they were like, Rosalind, you were amazing. You were everything we want you to be. You have gone above and beyond. And more than likely, you didn't notate that. You didn't, print a copy. You didn't send it to your personal email address. And I talked about, I left a job like voluntarily. And sure enough, like the app that they use to allow you to use like your corporate email and so forth, they use it to delete information off of my phone, like my personal stuff. And so of course they're going to delete anything and everything that you might have access to. So I think that's one of the things too, is to have like those hard copies. So maybe tell us a little bit about like, okay, started the job day one. I love the job. I love the people. Things are great.
Yeah.
I'm not assuming that things are going to go wrong, but what should I start to keep on day one so you have a better paper trail? Because usually by the time you start the paper trail, you complaining, you mad, and you don't even remember. You like, I know she got on my nerves last year too. She said some foolishness then, but you don't necessarily have that on hand. So day one, somebody probably started a job tomorrow. Day one, what should that file look like? Where should it be? Should it be hard copy? And what kind of things should they be keeping in that file?
Yeah, so I tell all my clients the same thing. The first day you start a job, you need to read your employee handbook. You can download a copy for yourself if you want to, but at a minimum, you need to read it top to bottom, front to back, the whole thing. Second thing you need to do is create some sort of file, Google Drive, notepad in your iPhone, something where you just have a running receipt of everything that, something's bothering you, something happens, somebody says something, just go jot it down, think who, what, when, where, and why, right? It doesn't have to be super detailed. Just like I was in this meeting, Jill asked me, did I want fried chicken? I found that weird. Bob, Jill, and Jane was there. I didn't say anything about it and move on. And then the third thing is you need to ask your manager for the expectations of your role. That's probably the single most important thing that you could do, because you would be surprised how many jobs don't have objective expectations for the role. And in lieu of objective expectations, your performance becomes subjective, right? And we know that Black women are not given the benefit of the doubt. Marginalized people as a concept, but especially Black women, are not given the benefit of the doubt and the same grace that other employees are given. And so you need to make sure that the expectations of your role are written down somewhere, that they are clearly communicated to you, and that you and your boss are on the same page. A lot of people, they just get a job, and then they based on the job description, and then they get in there and the role scope has changed, and that's never really written down or documented anywhere. And then they get to the performance review, down the road, and the manager's like, oh, well, your performance is okay because you were doing this when I really wanted you to do this. So those are the three things that I tell everybody to do when they first start a job.
Now, this is something great. This is something that you might, you're putting together your file, put this on your calendar too. Catherine says she requests feedback every quarter via email from various levels of managers, peers, and then save those. So that's one of those things. Y'all know, the first thing they're going to say is she angry, she's combative. So go ahead and get that in writing where they're like, she's a pleasure to work with. She goes above and beyond. She stayed late, all of those. So when it is angry, combative, not a team player, you're like, wait, but 3 quarters straight, you were like, she's amazing. She's wonderful. She does my work and I take credit.
And doing that will also help you, right? So like a lot of the patterns that I see from my clients is that they got a new job, they weren't properly trained in the job, and then their performance dropped, right? So asking for feedback on some regular, consistent basis in writing will help you defend yourself down the line. Because I've been in performance reviews where they try to say my performance was, not good or whatever. And then I ask, well, when? And they'll say, oh, it was March 14th. And I'm like, oh, really? Because on February 25th, I asked you for feedback, and this is what let me pull it up for you. This is what you said, that all is well in the world. So I'm just confused as to how is it that on February 25th, I was a rock star, but then on March 14th, I needed an improvement. And they never have an answer, and they just go fix it in your performance review, because they can't just, like I said, it's not a legally defensible thing to do to overnight, declare that somebody was overperforming and then suddenly they're underperforming. So the more receipts you have, absolutely the better.
I feel like we need to put that on our calendar and be like, check in.
In writing.
Check in, request in writing.
Time on your manager's calendar, that's fine and well, but you need to request it in writing. And then if they don't respond in writing and y'all have an email, like a Zoom call, follow up. Thank you so much for meeting with you. I just want to recap what I've heard. So far, I'm meeting expectations. If I need to work on something, I need to work on this, and this. Thank you so much.
And so someone put in the comment too, and I think we talked about this. It says the moment you start having issues with a job, just move on. Now, I feel like that is definitely a feeling that I have felt. I expressed I had an issue. I won't say exactly when, because y'all can go on my LinkedIn and figure out where. But I had an issue previously in my work life, and I was very frustrated with promises that didn't happen. And I remember just being like, oh, I'm leaving. Like, these folks don't know I'm leaving. And And so is it beneficial just to up and leave? Like I probably am more like I'm gonna get out of here. And that's probably where we are. And employers are recognizing that. We're seeing that in the great resignation of folks being like, yeah, I'm good. But Sierra, you mentioned something, and being the recipient of a severance package myself in the past,
Yeah.
that's good money. It is good. I can chill and focus on myself money. And so although we're like, I'm just gonna leave and get a new job, sometimes it might make sense to see what kind of check they can write. So
Yeah,
tell
I
us
mean,
a little bit about like the severance process and like, okay, if you're going through this process and then like, all right, we're gonna let you go. What kind of conversation can you have to negotiate a severance that could be really nice to allow you some mental health weeks, months, and so forth?
so I'll just the first part of the question, which was like, just quit. I think that works for some, but doesn't work for all, right? Because at the end of the day, our economic security is tied to these jobs, and Black women are more likely to be the financial head of house in their households as either single parents or caretakers. And so I think generally speaking, everybody would just, like to be able to quit their job, but not everybody can. And I think, this group, which is centered around money and finance, ultimately is a good segue into, financial literacy and minding your money, because it is very liberating to have enough money to provide for yourself in the absence of a job for some amount of time. So before I get into the second part about severance, I would encourage everybody to, become financially literate. The Simple Path to Wealth. I recommend that book to everybody. I keep like 5 copies in my house. When people come over, I'm like, have you read The Simple Path to Wealth? Um, it's truly a revolutionary book. It simplifies finances and money down to, for people who are not, super complex and into, finances like that. So I would just encourage everybody to save your money, be financially literate, make sure you have some sort of cushion. I call it FU money, so that you can walk away when you feel you need to and not have to be concerned about your economic security in the short term. As far as severance goes, sometimes severance is offered to you. I've had clients call me with a severance package in hand, just being like, hey, should I take this? Like, is there anything else I should negotiate? Sometimes you have to ask for it. And there's two different ways to think about it, right? I don't encourage anybody to negotiate a severance package without a lawyer. Now, doing so with a lawyer means that a lawyer is going to take a third, which is pretty standard across the industry, right? But for me, it's like, what do I care? Because you're going to take a third of money that I wouldn't have had without you, and it's more money that I came into the situation with. But if you don't feel like you have a strong case, or if you talk to it, you don't feel like you have a strong case, you could ask, hey, is a severance package on the table, or is it an option? I've had to do that before, where it was just a messed up situation. And I phrased it, I was like, I take my career very seriously. I want to make sure that I have all the relevant, pertinent information available to me before I make a decision about my continued employment here. I want to understand what are the options available to me. If severance is included in those options, I want to know what a package would look like. And that's just a way to kind of backhandedly explore if it's even an option, without being like, I want severance, because that's never received well, even though that's what we want to say. So if you are given a severance package, usually it goes by your tenure in the company. The exception to that is if you have a really good case of like racism or discrimination, which I had in my case. But they usually give you like anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks, depending on how long you've been there. I've seen it as high, as a couple $1,000,000. Some of my clients, just because their documentation was right and they worked for a company that had a lot of money and could just afford to pay people to be quiet. Now, as a part of that, if you do take a severance agreement, usually you're not going to have a job after that, but you're going to have a little bit of breathing room to be able to find another job. But it's also going to have a bit about confidentiality, non-disparagement, which means you can't talk about them, they can't talk about you, and you also are basically signing away your right to sue, which When I tell clients that, they're usually like, "Oh, I don't want to do that," and I'm like, "Well, why not?" Because suing is very different than asking for severance. Suing is a very long, lengthy, and expensive process and very stressful. So why would you sue to get the same outcome when you could just negotiate severance, get your check, and go on about your business? Now, there are certain situations where a lawsuit is absolutely warranted. I mean, I have clients who are being called monkeys, literally, in meetings. In that situation, lawsuit. Severance is not going to get it unless you work for a company that wants to avoid these types of things because they have the reputation to protect, etc. So that's generally how the severance process goes. Like I said, I don't recommend. I've never gotten severance out of a lawyer, because when you have somebody advocating for you and using the law as justification, the numbers are automatically bigger than if it's just you operating off whatever, severance policy that they have, or negotiating with some whatever HR person. You're not a lawyer, you don't really know the legalese. So I personally don't recommend it, but I also understand that um, you know, going the lawyer route, it is going to be more expensive, in that you have to pay the lawyer a third.
And I will say two, one positive to that is the confidentiality is both ways. So if they don't say nothing about you, you don't say nothing about them, which means you can go and work in the industry without the next company thinking you're going to sue them too. So that actually could be great, because I do know a couple people that ended up blackballed in the industry because they went that route and it became public. And so then people are like, I don't know about that person. So it is kind of good. It's kind of good on both sides to be like, you know what, I'm gonna take my money and ride off into the sunset. So
Right.
somebody else says she got more by suing with a lawyer and taking a third. Now, one of the things, of course, you're going to take that file with you, I'm guessing, to the lawyer. Would they contact you first, Cierra, and then either you help them find an attorney, or do you converse with your attorney?
So I recommend my personal attorney. She's got me every severance check I've ever had, and she's a Black woman, and she's an absolute monster. And she's an absolute beast.
Information. You're gonna have to email me her so I can.
Yeah, she's an absolute monster. She's you know, she's just all about Black liberation and sticking it to the man. She's not one of those lawyers who are like soft or whatever. So sometimes I do recommend lawyers to my clients, but there's a lot of work that I have to do to get them to a point where she can even take the case, because a lot of the times what would happen is, notwithstanding overt things, right? Like the monkey thing, like that's we're now beyond.
I'm not shocked. I'm like,
all beyond, yeah. But in most cases, I'm coaching people how to navigate their way through this system to create this narrative that then the lawyer can take and use and advocate on your behalf. Because in the absence of that, if you just go straight to a lawyer, she's either going to say, "Oh, well, you need to, do this, that, and the third before I can help you," and she's not really going to take the time to do it because it's not her lane, right? She's in the lane of the law, and I'm in the lane of navigating through HR, using the policies and practices to your benefit. So it really just depends on the case. But I do have a relationship with my personal attorney, where I just, she's good. I trust her, and I know that everyone I send her is in good hands. So I do recommend her when it's appropriate.
that's a good thing to know. Now, we talked a little bit about the handbook. Now, day one, they give you, this 100-page book. And, if you like me, I like a trip. So first, I'm like, let me go to the vacation. Let me see, where I can go, how long I can be gone. Are there some extra days? What are some things in the handbook that day one people need to make note of? Or be more cognizant of? And I'm guessing, yes, we need a copy of that in a hard copy or to our personal email that we can keep on hand too. But what are some kind of your things to note within that handbook?
First and foremost, going to be your benefits. Black and brown people use benefits less than our non-Black and brown counterparts. So you need to understand what benefits are available to you, and you need to use them, all of them, every single year, including your vacation. Second thing is their harassment discrimination policy, and what is the process to get those things addressed. I talked about this earlier. You have to navigate within the system before you can seek accountability, because otherwise they're just going to say, oh, we didn't know. She signed the handbook. We don't know why she didn't follow the process. Had she followed the process, we would have done something about it. And whether they would have or not is irrelevant. But you have to navigate within the system first before you can do other things. And then the other one is performance evaluation process. What is the process? How do they manage performance? If there's like any kind of promotion criteria, you need to understand what that is, because Black and brown people are promoted less than our non-Black and brown counterparts. And so we just want to make sure that we understand what are the things that they're looking for as far as performance and promotion.
And that's a big one, because I feel like sometimes we be working hard because we know we gonna get promoted, and then
you don't.
Magically they're like, you were that close. If you would have just
the
been my golf buddy, you would have been in there.
All the markers always being moved. Always.
Like, if you would have just that much more. And so we talked a couple of different things about kind of processes and so forth. But one big thing, and I am loving to see this, I definitely have heard of some situations where people accidentally found out about pay. So if you find out that you were being grossly underpaid versus your peers, and when I say peers, these are people who aren't like you. Is that a reason to go to HR? How do you address that issue strategically? Because we know that the Black and white income gap is substantial. Definitely Black women to white men, even more substantial. We're working almost a whole year and a half to get to that 1 year of income. And so when we look at those kind of things, how do we address that utilizing HR to say, y'all owe me some money, that kind of thing?
So I actually wrote an ebook about this. It's called At the Table, Negotiating Guide for Black Women. It's available. You go on my Instagram and click on the link in bio. You can purchase it there. It's only $10. There are 3 real times that you can influence your compensation, right? One is before you start working, and the other 2 are after you start working. The first one is obviously the negotiation process, right? I don't care if they say it's not negotiable. You need to try to negotiate, because that is the single easiest time that you have to try to increase your pay outside of the performance metric process, which we know it has a lot of bias built into it just because humans built it, right? So that's the single most important time. The second thing that you could do once you start the job is leverage your peers. Talking about your pay at work is considered protected considered activity under the National Labor Relations Act, which basically means they can't fire you, they can't retaliate against you, they can't ask you to stop talking about your pay at work. And not just your pay, working conditions, etc. So nothing can happen to you for simply talking about your pay at work. The single most important thing you could do is ask your coworkers to share their data. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can set up like a Google survey where people can report anonymously. I know at Google, some engineer had created a website where people could just go in and type their level, education, experience, etc. But if you're not even that sophisticated, you just send an email and you say, hey, I really value you guys and the work that you're doing. I enjoy being on this team. I just want to make sure that we're all being paid equitably for the work that we're doing. If you don't mind, I would, like to share my salary. And we can all, just be transparent in what we're making to make sure that we're all being paid fairly and equitably. So that's the first thing you do. Then if they respond, you can take the information to your manager and say, hey, look, can you help me understand why there's a drastic difference in pay when we're all doing the same work? Now, you have to understand how compensation works, right? Because just because you're doing the same job doesn't mean you're going to get paid the same, because there's a lot of things that go into compensation, and it depends on your company's compensation philosophy, right? Some companies value education, they value experience, they may value relevant work experience, they may value YE, which is age minus 18. So it really just depends. But generally speaking, the delta should not be that big, right? So if me and you are doing the same job, I have a master's and you have a bachelor's, I'm probably going to get paid more than you, but it shouldn't be $30,000 different, right? It should maybe be $5,000, $10,000. So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do when you're already in the job is go back to the market. So you can go out, interview, get a job offer, and that job offer is really going to confirm for you what the market is telling you that you are worth for the role that you're doing. Then once you have an offer, you can go back to your company and say, hey, look, the market has now confirmed to me that I'm worth this amount of money. I like working here. I like being here, but I'm not being paid the market rate as proven by this job offer. And then you can be a little bit more aggressive because you have nothing to lose, right? You have a job offer in your hand. So they can either match it or you can quit. So between those two, I think when you're already in the job, those are the things that I recommend that my clients do to get the data information that they need to kind of force their company to give them more money. Now, of course, I always tell my clients the risk is that they could just be like, we don't care. That happened to me. I went out and got another job offer. They were like, oh, well, that is cute, but we're not gonna match it. And at that point I knew, okay, that's fine. You don't see the value here. Okay, here's my notice. There's no point in me staying here. And I have another job offer. So I'm gonna go where the money is and y'all be blessed.
And I think that's a good situation to be in, but that
Yes.
also lets you know kind of the value that you have. And I think we're in a different cycle where companies were calling your bluff, like, yeah, no, we ain't matching that. And now they might be like, wait, hold on, hold on, we were just playing.
The job market right now is crazy. The job market right now. That's why I tell my clients, like, you are 2 clicks away from a job at this point because there's so much movement in the market. You need to make sure your resume is up to date, your LinkedIn is up to date, and comprehensive in the work that you're doing. But it's not really that hard to find employment because there's just so much movement going on. People are quitting because they don't want to go back to the office, and it's just all kind of stuff right now. So it's a good time to be in the market. So I encourage people to just to interview, even if you ain't thinking about leaving your job, just interview just to see what the market is telling you that you're worth. It's good corporate hygiene.
Now, this is a crazy one. And like I said, sometimes I see crazy things and I'm like, I don't believe that. But yeah, no, like I believe this. And I almost want to be like, girl, are you in the South? She said the last time she went to HR to report someone who brought a gun into the workplace. I'm assuming you don't work at a shooting range. She said the company is going through a merger. So they just said that you could move offices. But they weren't going to terminate the person who brought the gun. Now, I'm thinking this is the time you definitely need to document. Like, I mean, I'd probably be like, knocking
You need to call the
on like, yo, I
police.
just saw this, but
You need to call the police. Okay. That is not the time to be talking about no HR, baby. That is time for 911. Okay.
it's too many crazy folks. We are hearing too many crazy things, and mental health is untreated in too much of our population. That yeah, nah. If
My first call would have been to 911. My second call would have been my lawyer. Because
and
what is that?
yeah, yeah, and I want to say, girl, where you at? Because I'm from Georgia, and they just passed that. Basically, you can get an ice cream and a gun at the same stop law. So
A lot of employers have, workplace violence policies in their handbook. So it's shocking to me. But I can see maybe they're in the middle of a merger, but a gun? Oh no, ma'am. I would have got me a check from my business.
that'd kind of mess up the merger if they, if the coffee cold and she just go crazy a little bit. So
No, ma'am.
now you mentioned one thing that made me think. So the return to work, people are like, I ain't comfortable.
Yeah.
People still getting sick. Once again, it's like y'all ain't require nobody to wear masks, all these kind of things. What can one do to protect their job if they're saying, I've been at home for 2 years, I am working, I am clocked in, I am answering every damn Zoom and Teams call and all the emails, but I don't
Yeah.
want to come back and sit there and risk my life just so I can say here, present.
Yeah.
What can they do to protect their jobs in that respect?
So part of my responsibility to all my clients is to be honest, and the answer to that is nothing, because it's company policy, and it's just one of those things where you can abide by it or not. A lot of companies are giving people options of like severance, to just leave if that's their policy. What I have seen is an uptick in people going the mental health route. A lot of people getting their dogs registered as service animals, and using legitimate mental health concerns as a reason why they can't go back to the office. So I'm not saying that that's what you should do. I'm just saying that that's what I've been seeing uptick in. I also seen like companies trying to deny those like reasonable accommodations. So what happens is people say, "Oh, I have anxiety. I can't go into the office because I have anxiety." And the accommodation that I need is I just need to work from home indefinitely. So the company has the responsibility under the ADA, American Disabilities Act, to engage in what's called an interactive process. And that just means they're determining if your reasonable accommodation is in fact reasonable or if it causes an undue burden on the business. And so what companies are starting to say is, oh, well, if you're not physically in the office and able to collaborate, as you were before COVID, then, that's an undue burden on the business, in which case you'll be disability separated out, but at least you'll be, separated out with a check. So that's what I've seen. But as far as like, you being, able-bodied and sound mind, not want to come into the office, there's really nothing that you could do because it's a company policy.
Bringing dogs to work. I want to see all the dogs at work. a whole floor of nothing but dogs. Now, this is one question somebody else brought up is the non-competes. And so depending on what industry you're in, they are more prevalent than others. How enforceable are non-competes? Should you sign them? Should you negotiate them? When you leave, should you just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter? I mean, I know in certain states, they're less enforceable than others. Yeah. What should people be aware of when they're presented with some type of non-compete?
So I'm not a lawyer, so I want to answer this question to the best of my non-lawyer ability. Non-competes are really more geared toward executives because there's a lot of business strategy that goes on at a high level. I think non-disclosures are probably more common at like the lower level of the organization, meaning that like you're going to be exposed to some proprietary information that if you go to a competitor, like you can't talk about, or if you leave, you can't share the information. Non-competes are enforceable. I've seen Google and Amazon fight for months over this executive who was leading their banking industry. And so Google then hired him to lead their banking, but then Amazon sued for violation of non-compete. And so they just moved him to the healthcare sector instead of the banking sector. So they're definitely enforceable, but like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't tell you what to begin to look out for. I personally never signed non-compete. I've only signed an NDA. So
yeah, I definitely have signed a non-compete, and I've definitely been in that same situation where they're like, "We go have you do something a little different,
just a
little
enough to satisfy the requirements of the
still white chocolate instead of milk chocolate." And now it's not the same product, so it's totally different. So that's definitely a big one. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? I know we are right up against the top of the hour. Any other questions or closing remarks that you can think of? I know one of the main things is get your folder. So if you have been on your job for 10 years, try and get you 10 years of memory and go back and type that up. Tomorrow or tonight, if you feel like it, download your employee handbook and peruse the thing, which I probably can't remember all the pieces in it, but definitely if you don't have access to it, that's going to be one thing too. Oh, this was a good one. So the buzzwords. So buzzwords: harass, toxic work environment. And so she cringed because in the military, they're blackballed from promotion, especially for using those type terms. I think that's probably one of the main things when we're like, I'm working so hard, I don't want to mess up my future. How do you kind of gauge one versus the other? And especially, I know the military is kind of a very specialized type space because it's not like you can be like, I'm gonna jump from the Army to the Marines or something like that. So
Yeah.
how do you maneuver an environment like that?
So, I tell my clients, my role here is to be honest and to explain to you the risks so that you can make an informed decision. And it doesn't matter if you're in the military or if you're in technology or if you're in healthcare. Every time we go to HR, that risk is always there to be blackballed, to be labeled. What I tell my clients is that risk exists as a function of your existence as a Black person. If you walk into a store, somebody may think that you're stealing, right? If I walk into a meeting, it doesn't matter how nice I am, somebody's going to think that I'm angry, right? And what I tell my clients and what I decided to start framing my mental mindset is I can't control all of this, right? I literally have X amount of energy. It's not a unlimited source, right? I am not every woman. She is not all in me. Okay.
No.
I only have this much. And so if I accept that I only have so much energy, then I also have to accept that I can't focus on all of these risks, right? I have to focus on what is in my best interest and what is going to produce the best outcomes for me and my mental health. Because it doesn't matter how nice I am, I'm still Black and my skin is going to show up before I ever say a word. But that doesn't mean that I deserve to be treated less. That doesn't mean that I don't have the same rights as everybody else in the workplace. And that definitely doesn't mean that you're going to talk to me any kind of way and disrespect me in any kind of way. Now, the balance is, okay, how do I balance getting my needs met and economic security, right? That's always the trick, right? And where is that line, right? Where do we say, okay, I'm no longer going to find, my financial security is less important than my mental health in this situation. I can never define that line for you. I can only define it for myself. And the day that I got some FU money, the balance switched, right? Now there's not any situation ever that I will ever be in where I feel like, I can't say nothing or I got to just deal with this, right? But I understand everybody's not there. So what I would say is get your money right, save your money, become financially independent. And that way, when the moment comes, you'll be able to make the decision that's best for you.
I think that's great words. Now, this is a great question for us to end on. It says, great presentation, excellent. Is there a website or social media that people can follow, get more information, or schedule some time to chat with you and get their money too?
Yep. So the website is cagebirdhr.com. You see on my thing, cagebirdhr, just .com instead of LLC. And then all our social handles are cagebirdhr on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, but we're most active on Instagram.
Perfect. And then tell us again the title of your book. I tried to write it down.
So the book is called At the Table, Negotiating Guide for Black Women. If you go on LinkedIn and click link in bio, you'll see the link where you can purchase that. And then the book that I talked about for financial fitness and education is Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. It's a revolutionary book. Everybody should read it.
I definitely read that one. I'm a huge reader, so if y'all ever want to talk about it and chat about it, but it's a great mindset book too. I think before you can do anything else, to really kind of understand where your money is going and what it actually means and what it equals. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. I love the engagement always. If you are looking, make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications on our YouTube channel so you never miss a Money Monday, because yes, y'all gonna get y'all money. Y'all gonna be treated fairly in corporate America. But as we are making this money, we want to make this money work for us so we will have infinite financial independence. I want to thank you so much for being with us here. This was so great. It's like all the good notes. When y'all go to work tomorrow, breathe, get prepared, and get your money. and work
Yes.
in a situation where you can bring your best, but then you can actually get the same in return. Make sure you join us next Monday at 7 p.m. I can't wait. Our speaker next week, we're going to talk about getting some more money. So this is going to be a really good session next week too. So I can't wait to see you all next week. And until then, have a good night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.